The legend that is Tom Byron didn't enter the adult film industry looking like someone who would dominate it for decades. He looked more like the kid who mowed your lawn in the summer or held the door for you at the mall food court. Born Thomas Bryan Taliaferro Jr. in Houston in 1961, he had a soft, slightly shy face that made him seem younger than he was, and an air of innocence that set him apart from almost everyone else. Orbiting the Los Angeles mature film scene in the early 1980s, at a time when the industry was overflowing with big personalities and bigger egos, Byron showed up looking like the boy next door who accidentally wandered onto a genre set. But that's exactly why it worked. He didn't posture or swagger, he wasn't trying to look dangerous. His expressions carried a kind of wide-eyed sincerity, sometimes confusion, sometimes surprise, that made him feel more like an accidental participant rather than someone trying to dominate. Directors and audiences noticed immediately, and yet the more he appeared on camera, the clearer it became that his appeal wasn't an accident. Tom Byron had stumbled into the right place at the right moment, but it was his very ordinariness, that unlikely sense of innocence, which made him one of the most memorable performers of the era. Byron found steady work immediately after entering the industry in 1982. Directors in the early video era were scrambling to find performers who could adapt to the faster, looser production schedules that home video enabled. Many were searching for reliable personalities, men who didn't freeze under pressure, didn't make everything theatrical, and could carry a scene without forcing it. Byron had that quality in spades. On camera, he had the uncanny ability to appear simultaneously overwhelmed and completely at ease, an emotional transparency that made him completely compelling in his screen roles. His early ascent was strengthened by the directors who took him seriously. Gary Graver, one of the most ambitious, narrative-driven filmmakers in the industry, cast Byron in a significant role in 1983's Private Teacher. Acting alongside Golden Age legends such as Kay Parker and Honey Wilder, Byron held his own in this character-driven domestic drama that demanded performers who could sell the premise. Up and Coming provided another early role that saw him acting alongside big names. Here, he shares scenes with industry megastar Marilyn Chambers in what was a big-budget production helmed by Stu Seagal. Byron may not have been a classically trained actor, but he had instincts. He understood when to lean into comedic moments, when to soften scenes, and how to look like a real character instead of a caricature. But it was his appearance in Henri Pachar's Taboo American Style series that helped turn Byron into arguably one of the most well-known male stars of the decade. Taboo American Style wasn't just a popular rental, it became a cultural touchpoint of its era, the kind of video store staple that millions ended up seeing. And Byron, often soft-spoken and wide-eyed in the midst of the chaos, became part of its identity. Late in the decade, Byron continued to build credibility with appearances in quality Dark Brother productions, such as the highly acclaimed alt-porn classic New Wave Hookers and the well-received third installment of The Devil in Miss Jones franchise. These were films that pushed the stylistic limits of the genre, incorporating music video style aesthetics. He was also in countless other movies throughout the decade. Byron's consistency was exactly why directors hired him. Even as the industry grew more competitive and more crowded, Byron remained everywhere, not because he was trying to dominate the screen, but because he was the rare performer who elevated the energy around him simply by being fully present. The 1990s brought further shifts to the nature of industry output, and Byron transformed with it. The clean-cut face of the 1980s began growing into a longer-haired, rougher look. It was edgier and distinctly more lived in. If the 80s version of Byron looked like a kid who stumbled onto a set, the 90s version looked like someone who had seen things, survived them, and was now moving with a hardened edge. This reinvention wasn't theatrical. It wasn't carefully engineered. It was just Byron naturally adapting the same way he always had. And again, it worked. Through the 1990s, he remained one of the most consistently working male performers, navigating the rapid-fire production schedules that defined the decade while branching out into directing and producing. Behind the camera, he was practical and calm. He knew how sets functioned, how scenes were paced, and how to keep a production moving without meltdown. By now, he was a veteran who brought professionalism, not ego, into the room. The sheer scale of his output during these later years is astonishing. By 2013, he had accumulated such an enormous body of work that he was cited as one of the most prolific performers in the history of adult film. His contributions as a director lasted well into the 2000s, and he was eventually inducted into both the AVN and XRCO Halls of Fame, honors reserved not just for longevity, but for influence. What makes Byron's story unusual isn't just the volume of his career, but its unceremonious stability. Unlike many performers who flamed out, disappeared, or loudly reinvented themselves, Byron just got on with it. He brought the professionalism and he endured. And when he eventually began stepping back in the 2010s, it wasn't with a big theatrical announcement. He just eased out, the way someone gradually leaves a party without fuss. He's one of the few performers who bridged almost every major transformation in the industry. The last gasp of the big ambition narrative features of the early 80s, the video-based pipeline later in the decade, the gonzo explosion of the 90s, the DVD boom of the 2000s, and the early digital period of the 2010s. Very few lasted through all of that, even fewer with the skill and ongoing relevance like Tom Byron. Looking back at his career, it becomes clear that his success wasn't fueled by the mythology that surrounds many stars. It came from something simpler. He was believable. He was adaptable. He was the rare performer whose humanity showed through the camera decade after decade, long after most of his peers had faded. And if you ever watch this, Tom, we all thank you for the great work that you did throughout what was an amazing career. Okay, thanks for watching, as always, everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.